bans, rotation, and what to play moving forward in Standard. We're going to discuss all of that and maybe a little bit about my Pro Tour experience today on Bazaar Coverage. My name is Nathan, and I'm part of Team Quality Lines, and I was lucky enough to participate in the most recent Pro Tour Final Fantasy. This Pro Tour consisted of Standard format and Draft, which was Final Fantasy Limited, and I was lucky enough to actually be featured on coverage for a couple of rounds for Limited, which was very exciting. But we're here today to talk about Standard, both what I ended up playing there, what I would play for the next couple of weeks before rotation, and moving forward from that. So it's going to discuss the deck that I played updated for the bans, which was Azorius Omniscience, and the deck that I really wish that I was able to play, which was a Sephiroth Brew. So let's get into it. So I played blue-white Omniscience for the Pro Tour. I was relatively happy with my deck list going into it. I think I was not quite as prepared for the mirror as I should have been. I probably should have anticipated it to be a little bit higher percentages. I ended up 2-1 against domain variants, which included both the more white-based one and a black-based variant that Ben Stark was playing. I ended up 2-1 against blue-red prowess, but then ended up 1-3 against the Azorius Omniscience mirror, which ended up being, the deck that I played against the most, and I was surprised by that. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about what I would play for the next couple of weeks moving forward. And this is the deck list that I think is quite well designed for the current meta. So, a couple of cards to talk about. First and foremost would be the replacement for Abuelos, which is Repair and Recharge. This card, to state the obvious, is not as good. It's 1 mana more expensive, at least on a baseline. The upside is that when you return Omniscience with this, it can't be targeted by things like Torch the Tower. That was a downside to Abuelos, was that occasionally you would go for the 4 mana, reanimate to combo, your opponent's interaction would be a bunch of dead removal spells which had no other use in the matchup besides hitting your 1-1 Omniscience, and you would end up fizzling. Now, a turn slower, but a little bit more powerful. The format in general has slowed down, and I think that these changes generally have made the deck still extremely competitive. Repair and Recharge doesn't... it's a very different card. It doesn't have a lot of upsides, but the one thing to keep in mind with it is it can return artifacts and planeswalkers. And that's part of the reason why Jace has been included here. Before the Pro Tour, we had a number of discussions about if you needed a win con at all in this deck. A lot of the time, you put Omniscience into play, your opponent kind of concedes on the spot if they don't have an answer. You get to spin your wheels or through your whole deck. A number of us ended up on either Jace or Founding the Third Path. I believe Sean Henry, who was on our team, who actually ended up going 9-1 with Omniscience, which was very impressive, was on a Jace in the main deck, and he was a big fan of that card. I think with Repair and Recharge in this deck now, it is in a much better place, personally. And it's also good when the format slows down and people are playing more control decks. This card plays well into that game plan. Mill your opponent for X amount, bounce it back to your hand with the Morang River Regent, rinse and repeat. I think it's a good time to putting Jace in your deck. Another card in the main deck that a lot of people aren't playing in Omniscience decks is Stock Up. I believe it is just a mistake to not play this card somewhere in your Omniscience deck, preferably the main deck. It is extremely powerful. It is the best thing, in my opinion, to see when you are trying to combo. The Omniscience combo does have a fail rate, which I found at the Pro Tour. I had a couple times where I would go for it in turn 4 on the play, put an Omniscience into play, and then fizzle, and my opponent would kill me. I think Stock Up is just far and away, if I see it and I put Omniscience into play, I feel like I'm in a very good position. The only other card in the main deck that might be a little bit out of place is the Day of Judgment. Temporary Lockdown was part of the reason to play this deck. Honestly, it was just such a slam dunk against the blue-red decks, the low-to-the-ground mono-red, especially mono-red, who didn't have an efficient answer to Temporary Lockdown. They kind of just had to play into it and then put more creatures into play. They weren't going to bounce it. They weren't going to remove it. The format has become much more kind of flash-based, and blue-black mid-range is one of the most popular decks at the moment. I would say Day of Judgment is a nice kind of fourth mass removal spell in this slot, and especially with more 3-drops, things like Preacher of the Schism in play, you just kind of need a little bit more of a catch-all answer. In the sideboard, there's probably 2 cards to talk about that are not always seen in these sideboards. Number 1 would be Clarion Conqueror. This was not a card that we were looking forward to going into the PT, and part of the reason why we didn't play it was because it just didn't fit the expected metagame. It wasn't great against Prowess. It wasn't great in the mirror. I know a lot of people were bringing it in the mirror, but it wasn't sort of the best card you want. Now, though, with the Vivi Cauldron deck, with blue-black midrange being popular, and also with the Roots deck, with the Insidious Roots deck being popular, this card is so good against all 3 of those decks. Insidious Roots in particular, if you land this card, most of their deck stops functioning, and it is kind of, the game becomes playing around this dragon, and if it survives, you're almost certainly going to win the game. The next one is Elspeth. This was playing sort of a replacement role of the 3rd Overlord of the Mistmores. We knew that Overlord was requirement, especially for some matchups if you wanted to do a full transformational sideboard, take out 4 Omniscience, take out 4 of your Abuelos, bring in Overlords, Voices, Get Lost, whatever else you need. I was a very big fan of having one of these. I will say probably for a different expected metagame than what the PT ended up being, but I think it makes even more sense moving forward now. This card is at its best against black midrange decks without blue in it. So that is Golgari midrange, that is the Demons decks, any of that. It is a great, consistent threat. It turns the corner very quickly. Highly recommend having one of these in the sideboard. So this is the deck I think I would play moving forward if you wanted to play Omniscience for the next couple of weeks. You know, maybe win a City of Brass at one of the game days. But next up, we're going to talk about the deck that I really wish I had been able to play at the PT. This is the deck that I really wish I had been able to play for the Pro Tour. Black-White Sacrifice, sort of mid-rangey with Sephiroth. It revolves very much around the 3-drops, Sephiroth and Enduring Innocence. Ruthless Lawbringer is much more of a role player here. It's not sort of a key card, but it does a lot of what you want. It's more of a sideboard card, but still does some useful interactions in the main deck and sort of frees up slot in the sideboard by being main deck. The main problem with this deck was the blue-red matchup. It was actually in testing doing quite well against mono-red. It was doing quite well against Omniscience and some of the other variants. This deck can actually kill surprisingly quickly, especially with a curve of like 1-drop Voice of Victory Sephiroth. Your opponent is probably dying in, by turn 4, turn 5. But the interaction of Corey Steel plus, bounce your 3-drop, torch the tower, it was just very difficult to beat that matchup. And thankfully, I was talked out of playing this deck for the PT. I think the result would have been much worse. But I think moving forward, an important part to realize is that Cut Down and Go for the Throat are both rotating out of our standard format. I'm of the opinion that with the rotation of Cut Down, if we don't get a powerful replacement at 1-drop, Voice of Victory is likely to become a premium 2-drop in the new standard format. This card was a little bit too easily removed with the inclusion of Cut Down. But it does a lot. It's sort of a theoretical 3/3 for 2 mana, which is a very good rate. The text on it is not meaningless. Your opponent not being able to cast spells means, say, if your opponent leaves up a removal spell on their turn, you play this on turn 2, they have to use their own turn to kill it, which kind of comes up a lot against the blue-black mid-range currently. But again, if Cut Down, if they get to be on the play, untap, Cut Down, play a 2-drop, you still don't feel like you're great. Now, if they have to untap and spend their 2 or 3 mana on their whole turn killing this, I think you feel much better. So it's probably going to be a much more powerful card moving forward in the new format. The speed interaction in this deck is interesting. I think this is probably one of the decks that uses speed the best because you can very easily get in chip shot damage, either by draining your opponent for 1, attacking them with a 1/1 insect left over by Infestation Sage, or just attacking them with, say, a Voice of Victory, or one of your warrior tokens gets through. And Zahur is extremely powerful if you ever get to 4 mana. It may look a little bit... It's sort of just another sacrifice outlet on top of Bartholomew, because you don't really want to play the full 4, given that it's legendary. I understand that you are playing for Sephiroth, but that card is like much more high impact than something like Bartholomew. We've already had a couple of cards spoiled that I think would be very impactful in this deck, but I'm looking forward to almost certainly be another video talking about updates to this when we get a full Edge of Eternity spoiler. But for now, Zahur is kind of the secondary sacrifice outlet opposed to Bartholomew. As I said, I think this deck is going to be very powerful moving forward. The sideboard is, I think, relatively tuned. Something like Graveyard Hate is going to be the biggest question. Lord Skitter was always good in this build. It both incidentally ate your opponent's graveyard and also gave you some leftover 1/1s to eat with Sephiroth, eat with your Bartholomew. Elspeth, I know I talked about that card. Maybe I'm just a big Elspeth fan. Talked about it in Omniscience deck. But it's very good here. Being able to double up your Voice of Victory, double up your Dalkovan Encampment when this triggers, your Fountain Port, anything like an Infestation Sage or a Nesting Bot is making double tokens with it. You kind of just want some extra top end against the board wipe and mono black variants that are going to try and spot removal all of your creatures. So I really like this card, and I think it's probably another one that's going to go up with the new standard format. The only other card that is not in this deck list, but I have put down here and considering that I think is worth just chatting about, is Season of the Burrow. Given how fast Standard has been for a while, 5-drops have not been a place where you want to be, especially, sorcery speed 5-drops. This card is quite powerful, and especially in this deck, both the first and second modes have a lot of utility. You can make 5/1/1s if you need to have just a bunch of sacrifice outlet. The one that really interests me, though, is the third mode that you can do once with this, returning the target permanent and giving it an indestructible counter. I imagine putting Sephiroth into play with this deck and giving it indestructible is going to be close to unbeatable, probably. It means that board wipes, non-exile board wipes at least, things like Day of Judgment, can't get rid of it. It may be that the 5-drop slot is just not where you really want to be, especially main deck, and there are other cards to be high impact post board. But I think this is a card that I want to keep an eye on and might be quite interesting in this kind of deck moving forward. So this one is my sort of minor fever dream I had when the black-white deck was not working. The main reason I would say why the black-white deck was a little bit suspect, besides the fact that it was getting 3-drops bounced, was a lack of good 1-drops. Now this deck, part of the reason why I think you can even play Sephiroth, designing it similarly to the modern variants that are now playing Sephiroth, is kind of the army in the can. They get Ocelot Pride. We kind of get Ocelot Pride at home, which is things like Infestation Sage and Voice of Victory. Now, I think Stadium Headliner is not a great replacement, but I think this is the only other cheap mobilized card in the set. And if we can fit both of this and Voice of Victory in the deck, I think that's probably the best place to be. The mana base is going to be the main issue with this deck, and it was the main issue. Moving forward, though, we do end up getting Godless Shrine and Sacred Foundry at a minimum. And like I discussed before, the inclusion of the Shocklands really makes the Verges much better. Something like a 3-color mana base, you just can't really play the Verges because you can't play any basic land types. You can't really play... this one can't really play Surveil lands. You get that a little bit with the Jeskai control deck. You can kind of make the 3-color mana base work. Not here. A couple of other nice interactions in this deck. Summon Brynhilda plays very well in this deck as a source of card advantage and also giving your very powerful 3-drops haste. The interaction between Summon Brynhilda and giving Sephiroth haste, or the other really nice part of this deck is being able to consistently reanimate Brynhilda with Alessia, who laughs at fate. So it's kind of a constant source of creature-based card advantage on top of the Enduring Innocence, then drawing you a card. You kind of overwhelm your opponent very quickly. As I mentioned before, the 1-drops are kind of the worst part of these decks. Forsaken Miner, I didn't talk about it in the last screen, but is a bit of a mopey 1-drop, but you kind of always want to see at least one of it when your interaction with Sephiroth and Bartholomew. So if you ever flip your Sephiroth, have an emblem, Forsaken Miner is just never staying in the graveyard. You kind of get to drain your opponent for X equals the number of black mana sources that you have. Just keep doing that. rinse and repeat. So this is a deck that I really want to work on moving forward. The sideboard you see here is very sort of haphazard, was thrown together during testing. I do think Fire Magic is at a very all-time high at the moment. It's very good against the blue-black mid-range decks. Even just 1 damage to all creatures kills most of what they have, besides Kaito and besides Preacher of the Schism. And I guess also the Enduring 4-drop. Thunder of Unity is another card that surprisingly impressed me when I was testing this deck. I think that's another card to look into. But this is something that I will recreate the mana base moving forward, and I'm looking forward to rotation where I can make another video discussing this. All of the deck lists that have been shown in this video are going to be down in the description. I'll leave the Mox Field links if you want to check them out. Feel free to use them and share them. While they're not updated with the new set just yet, they will be when the full spoiler is out, and there'll almost certainly be another video discussing the future of Standard and maybe some of these decks, maybe some updates. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully the Omniscience one at least can win some people or help some people with some game days, get some promos. So good luck moving forward with that. Make sure that you support the channel, support Bazaar MTG, because they've got a lot more videos coming out. They're doing a lot of really exciting events. Pat is really pushing forward and trying to support the Australian Magic scene. So give him a big shout out, subscribe to the channel, like it, all those kind of things. But I've been Nathan, and thanks for watching.